to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. Happy to be here. And
Yeah.
I'd like to tell you about our special guest today.
Yes, we have company again.
We have company again. And today we're going to be talking to Kenny Santo, who's the senior manager of the HR Shared Services Center at Cox Auto.
Yeah.
And Cox Auto, that group serves more than 26,000 employees. So welcome, Kenny.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to have you. So, Kenny, one of the things we ask all of our guests here is how in the world you got into the HR or payroll world and why you stick around.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Gotta love it. And it's interesting because my background actually started out in IT. I worked for a BPO for a long time and ended doing enterprise server support for Dell. And when I left there at the request of a referral into HR, it was one of the biggest changes of my life because the cultures are so different. But I really enjoyed working with the people and the team and the variation in scope. The variety that HR can bring was really a drive for me, and just kept wanting to kind of be in that space. I actually left HR for a little while and went into more like business operations and went back to HR because I kind of missed it. And I was like, you know what, this is, I think, the place for me to stay. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, that's a great pathway. I think for the modern shared services to have that lens of technology. So much of it is tech driven. So yeah, congrats, man. Welcome.
Yeah, and have you been in HR now longer than all the combined other stuff? Because that's really your home base and where your heart is.
I think so. I did. I think between everything, they might almost be the same. IT is definitely less, but if I combine it with business operations, they're probably almost at the same. I'm pushing about 10 years, I think, total in HR. And I got my start in HR with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, and I did a good 5 to 6 years there, and that was a really eye-opening experience in HR, just with the size of that company, and really set me on that path forward where I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. I think Pete, at some point in time, we might have to consider like Hotel California as a little ditty that we stick in here, and you can check in, but you can never leave HR and payroll, right?
Yeah, it's like that Sopranos episode, or guy, the guy on Sopranos always like, every time I try to get out, they pull me back in. It's exactly what it is, right? The same thing. But I'm glad you stick around and stay, Kenny. I mean, these are I think there's a very rewarding, career you can have in HR that is always exciting. It's always changing. There's always opportunity. And I've seen a lot of people pivot around from different parts of the organization and land in HR and stay. And that's really, really exciting because I think it's nice to have those other lenses.
Yeah, so I know. Why don't we do a little bit of news, Pete, and then we'll get to talking about AI and HR. It's obviously one of the top, things that folks want to talk about and listen to. But we have a little bit of news for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a bunch of news this week. We've had a couple of different big things, but I thought we could first talk about the Workday and Insperity go to market. I know you know a lot about that. You've stayed close to it. So I've got some opinions, but love to hear what your thoughts are on that one.
Yeah, sure. So I think for folks who didn't see, last week was kind of a big news announcement, maybe a little bit out of the blue, some folks
Yeah.
might say.
A little
And
quiet too, maybe even. It might
yeah,
have sort of
quiet
slipped under the
also.
radar. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It is a little bit quiet. And so Insperity is a PEO, and Insperity and Workday announced joint strategic go to market. And I think the most important thing to think about here is just recognizing the potential of putting these two players together to really bring Workday down market. Is something that has some folks excited, other folks, like what, a little bit abashed, like what just happened. And obviously this is newly announced, and so it'll take a little bit of time, not only for folks to hear it and think about what it could, what it could bring, but also, to sort it out and put things in place to to actually make it happen and start to bring folks into a really new sort of model down market that is otherwise difficult to tap into.
Yeah, yeah. Look, this is a win-win for both of these firms. I mean, look, Insperity isn't just any PEO either, right? They're one of the top,
That's
I
right.
want to say 5 now, or they've always been top 5. They might even be top 3 or 4 in terms of worksite employees, and the size of their organization and the depth and experience they have with the small market. And if you know Workday, you know they're unapologetically expensive. They're a premium solution, very powerful. But they haven't been able to really crack the small business sector or target market because of the cost prohibitive nature of it. And I think that's what's the beautiful thing here is now Workday software is going to be pushed down below that sort of below 500 employer and made more affordable, right? And that's where Insperity has the mammoth task of transforming their organization around Workday as their service enabling technology and really becoming a co-seller, deployer, operator of the platform. So this is really going to put, I think, all of the down market solutions kind of on notice. Right now, you've got the 500-pound HCM gorilla in the room playing in this SMB space, and Insperity is going to be the gateway to that happening. So a lot of excitement here, I think, for both organizations. It's going to take a little while to get this entirely to market, right? Workday has to ready their platform for PEO. It's not exactly the same construct as a regular HR operation. But there's a lot of excitement here. And I think this is going to be really cool. And I think it's really going to put a lot of pressure down market for some of these HCM solutions to have to now catch up to Workday where they were already trying to do so. But I think you're going to see, I think it might trigger some interesting, maybe an acquisitions. Who knows? It might even trigger some partnerships at least. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to keep our eye on this one.
Yeah. So just remember, everybody, you heard it here first.
Yeah, yeah. And are you writing something up on this, Julie? I know we are. Just curious if you are.
Yes, for
Yeah,
sure.
good.
Yep,
Yeah,
planning on it.
yeah. Well, we'll be sure to share those perspectives, and I'm sure we'll learn more as we go along. I'll be at the Workday Innovation Summit in April, so I'm hoping we're going to hear a bit more clarity on how this is going to work. So exciting stuff.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now you had a couple others here that you wanted to highlight. Where are you going next?
Well, look, payroll has been in the news a lot. I mean, I think that's kind of like cliche, but at this point, but yeah, two big announcements here this last week that I think are very, very keen that you should check out. Number one, again in the HCM space, HiBob has finally, and I've given them this feedback again. Really happy to see they are finally giving in and adding payroll to their solution. So if you know the HiBob platform, it's really well adopted. It's a highly visual, highly culture-oriented HCM capability, but fundamentally, they strategically left payroll out of that. Right in the beginning of design of their platform, they certainly had a hub where you could orchestrate payroll globally through a number of their partners in the same way that many of the HCMs have taken it. But now, what they've done is they've acquired Pento, their partner. I believe, don't quote me here, I want to say they're in either Denmark or somewhere in Europe. But basically buying one of their integrated partners and now going to take payroll forward natively in their platform. So I have a briefing coming up with them soon. I'm going to get more info on this, but this is really exciting, I think, for the HiBob platform, who is already doing very well. And now they've added a piece that I would imagine might have cut off a segment of buyers that would have said, hey, I would love the solution, but it doesn't have payroll integrated. And so now this is here. So I'm excited to see this. It's a great ad.
Yeah, as an advisor, I would say it definitely does broaden their potential in the market because
Yes.
if it's hard to do HR without payroll and payroll without HR. So
Yeah,
great point.
especially in the mid-market, small market, it's hard to imagine buying a solution for HCM that can handle the majority of your work, but not payroll. That's such a central part, especially to a younger, more operationally oriented firm. So yeah, I would imagine this opens their TAM up quite a bit and gives them a bit more competitiveness when it comes to playing with some of their peers or competitive peers. And so, yeah, I love it. I'm a little overdue, but I'm really excited for them, and I'm happy to see they brought that together.
All right, I
Yeah.
think you're hopping to another continent now.
Yeah. So our friends over at Ramco have once again innovated very, very secretively. You saw probably a lot of marketing buzz. I was in a video helping tease, just some of the innovation that's coming. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't entirely seen this yet. So I'm still looking forward to a briefing very soon. But Ramco has launched what they call PACE, PACE, or PAYCE is how it's spelled, PACE. And essentially, they're calling it air quotes, a revolutionizing payroll management through the Ramco PACE. And what it really is it's all the things you would want in a modern payroll solution, right? It's a low code, no code design, which means building onto your condition based rule set. For payroll is very easy, very drag and drop. It's tightly integrated with all of the leading HCM products by way of Ramco's existing partnerships with Workday and SuccessFactors and all the other solutions out there. Certainly has very visualized on-demand reporting and analytics capability. And most importantly here, certainly uses AI to drive compliance and real-time insights and all of the things you would want from AI. But what I think is super exciting is, again, with that no-code, low-code sort of approach that we're seeing with all of the platforms and the extensibility that we see, they're speeding implementation down from months to weeks. And so if you look at the value proposition of any of the major global solutions out there, they're all talking speed to market, speed to insights, speed to having a single view of payroll globally. And I think this is just another way of Ramco bringing together all of their innovation into a single solution that is going to be very, very interesting. So I'm excited to get more info here, but good stuff coming from Ramco once again.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's a birthday in the house, right? And
Yes.
congratulations to ADP turning
Yes.
75.
75. That just sounds like my grandparents or something. But and I've got a write up on the ADP Rethinks event from London, and I've got a little bit of my perspective on ADP at 75. The way I like to look at it, to be honest with you, is it's not your parents' ADP anymore. I would think you would agree with that, Julie.
Totally.
I know we've
Yes.
talked about that. It's not the ADP that you and I grew up on, but they also have readied themselves to be your kids' ADP. It's kind of the quote I used in my article, and the point there is that you look at the way they have really just doubled down on innovation in the last, I'd say, 10, 12 years. Their HCM products are fundamentally competing out there with the most prominent HCM labels. They're bringing, what I love is they've got the former CHRO, Srini Kutam, now leading product, which is super differentiated. I think Maria Black, the new CEO, is doing a tremendous job. That was a very shrewd move of moving Srini over. And she's really committed to bringing out the full power of ADP, engaging partners, and they're just on a very innovative path. So yeah, congratulations to ADP, 75 years old, really pioneered the industry for payroll outsourcing, maybe even HR outsourcing to some extent, and have really, really transitioned themselves away from that service bureau heritage. Certainly somewhere they still dominate, but absolutely become an incredibly innovative organization that just continues to pump out great stuff. So excited for them.
Well, folks will be looking, I'm sure, for your POV, your blog on that. And
And then lastly, before we jump over into AI, I'm excited to talk about this. Is of course the Payroll Confidence Survey is out there. If you haven't taken it, why not? No, but really take it, share it. Let's get it in the hands of everybody. I'd love for you to engage that and get that going. So
absolutely,
thank you.
Can't say enough about it. So
yes,
hurry
please.
up and get out there and spend your 15 minutes. It's really not it's really not a huge time suck. And the whole idea of gauging sentiment is we need to put a lot of feelers out.
Yes, absolutely. Let's get it in the hands of every payroll practitioner and help them share their voice.
All right. So what do you think? Should we start to, sorry, Kenny, you've been a little bit quiet over there, but now we want to turn a little bit of the focus into some conversation with you.
Yeah.
And really dig into some of the AI noise that's happening out there in the market.
Yeah. The realities too. I want to hear what the reality on the front lines is.
That's right.
Hey, sounds good. I was absorbing all the news. I was like, wow, that's a lot of news.
It is, right? This stuff happens fast.
That's right. It sure does. Well. Look, one of the things that I know about you, Kenny, from my time knowing you and interacting with you, is that you have an awful lot of contact center experience in the HR world. And when you think about automation, AI and other types of automation, contact centers have been one of the first places where we start to see, chatbots and call routing and just all kinds of cool things. And so I just wanted to see if that has mirrored kind of your experience. Like, have you seen and worked with, a number of things as they are evolving? How are they same or different from the noise that we're seeing now and the excitement about AI? What does your background tell us?
Yeah, so I definitely think that's one of the areas that gets looked at first, is because you get a lot of information coming out of contact centers from the front line. You get a lot of trending and data issues that are potentially coming up. So it's a great point of reference to start. Additionally, like call routing, you think about IVRs and what you can now do in IVRs, which you couldn't necessarily do 10 or 15 years ago with the automated support. I think about some of the things that I have seen with, um, even if you were to just call, your bank, you could process payments and do that stuff directly from the phone menu, which you couldn't necessarily do before. Chat bots that sit in front of live agents that can try to help answer your questions. These are things that have been evolving over time and becoming better as we continue to evolve the AI model and how strong it is. And then even the automated support through call routing, right? Like, I've used in the past ID verification, validating the identity of the caller before they even get to a person, and not just streamlining the experience of whoever's calling, but also streamlining the experience of who's supporting.
Yeah, yeah. Calling up the record, for example, right, has been around
Yep.
for quite some time, and those sorts of things. So I always wonder as we start, picking up on the AI, on the AI excitement, how much contact center folks are, sitting back in their chairs going, okay, like, next flavor for us of, trying to really impact and automate what's going on in our activities. And so what is the big excitement?
Yeah. Or is it going to replace us, right? Is it going to
Yeah.
augment or replace? Yeah.
And that's a great call out because there's a lot of understanding that I think it needs to be built as we look at AI, because the common reference is, is my job going to be replaced? And that's not really what the drive is. It's it's how do we add more value to the work we do? And that's what I've always tried to, relate to that conversation whenever it comes up, because when we look at the work, we look at what's going on, it's kind of like, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, why? Like, what can we improve from that so you can do something that's more value added, that engages you more in what you're doing day to day, so you don't hate your job. Like, that's kind of what it comes at. And I look at some of the augmentation possibilities of AI, to the point where what I've seen recently is agent assist, right? So it's AI automated that assists the representative in finding the information based on the conversation with the customer. So instead of me trying to search through a knowledge base, my AI assist is searching for me while I'm continuing that conversation, which provides a better experience overall to the customer.
Yeah, awesome. Totally awesome. So is that what kind of got you into the, the newer forms, or what has led you into all the things that have been happening in call centers in particular for a while, into kind of these new areas? Just is it management, right? Is it leadership that's saying, hey, you need to give this a look? Or do you find that it's more internally driven, and just your experience and the things that you're seeing and peers are doing? I mean, like, how does it come up? How do you start to go, oh wait, there's a new flavor of something that we have to look at?
Yeah, so that's it's interesting because I think for me personally, having an IT background has helped that conversation in HR, because, like I said kind of previously, the IT and HR cultures are different, and merging them together can create a different thought process for how we go through things in HR. And I've had a couple individuals that have followed the same track as myself, where they started out in IT and worked in HR. And when we look at problems, we start to ask different types of questions and bring that technology experience. I think that internally we say, like, hey, so why couldn't we use HR or automation? And typically, when we find that question pop up, the answer from what is, well, we don't know how it would work. So there's a lot of internal I would say barriers to kind of break down to say, let's start small. Let's have a conversation of could this be something that we look at? And unless there's a legal requirement to not use AI, why can't we? And really try to push past the initial, well, I don't know how it would work, so what would we do?
Do you guys use Kenny? Do you use it on the front end of your product, say customer facing versus just back office? And has that given you guys some learnings maybe to help you with HR, or did that help you?
I have used it a little bit more back office, less front facing.
Yeah,
I would say that chatbots are becoming more front facing,
yeah,
and that experience is very it's varied. And I think one of the reasons why it's varied is mainly because you have to make sure you understand your population before going into the automation route of front facing.
yeah,
So our population is very diverse in terms of age group, type of role, being at a desk versus being not at a desk to have access to that automation. So really having that understanding across the board of what our population looks like drives the conversation about what we might do front facing. From
yeah.
a back office standpoint, I would say that anything could be put on the table at that point.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I've seen many of the organizations that I seem to have talked to. I find a lot of the folks that are doing really well with it in the HR space or in the back office actually leveraged it in their product or their front end customer facing stuff first. So they learned, and now they're able to kind of bring it to their workforce. But yeah, no, I think I mean, how you arrive at it probably doesn't matter. It's all about just what you can, effectively use it for in your use cases, right?
Yeah. I'd be curious to know too. So, another way that I think HR organizations find themselves getting into the AI space is because a product that they use already or a software that they use already is embedding and fusing those, making noise about those, right? And I'd just be curious to know if you have some experience with certain of those where it's like, no, we're already using our CRM tool, and now they're presenting to us these new features, or we have access to something, but maybe we're not using the newest features, and a lot of those newest features are starting to be AI types of things.
Yeah, so 100%, and that's it's a great conversation that is kind of unfolding with me, um, and just our organization and how we're moving forward is the we do our applications. They're all have roadmaps that are starting to include AI, and in those roadmaps, I think for us, it's coming back and trying to understand, okay, how does this impact our service delivery? And the I would say gap between our service delivery and HRIT is, and what we're bridging and really building a focus on is the collaboration in understanding the roadmap. Because when I first started in HR, one of those things was that conversation around, so what can our applications even do? And there were times where nobody really knew, and we had to really explore that. And now the same thing I think is kind of unfolding with AI, is that it's being part of all these applications, and we have to understand what can we even do to then apply that to our delivery model. And our HRIT team is doing a great job in helping us understand what we can and can't do from the roadmap perspective, so we can look to evolve our delivery model.
Yeah, and it's competing and overlapping, right? I think that's some of the challenges as everyone races to, to think about how they can help with embedded automation. Then you end up with these gaps, but you also end up with areas that are overlapping, or there's really a strategic element of figuring out how am I going to put these things together to get the best of whatever, my world of roadmaps, right,
Yeah.
available to me.
You know what I've always kind of wondered, I mean, or I've been wondering recently more, really to both of you, like, how do you localize AI? Right? Like, because you mentioned kind of what you can and can't do, but that could be different in every state by the time, I mean, like we know New York has some rules, but maybe other states don't. We know the EU has some rules, but other countries don't yet. I'm sure they'll follow on, but like, is there going to be this need for folks and maybe even software providers to almost have localizations of their AI? I don't know if that's the right terminology, but how do you manage all that, right?
that's a really interesting call out too, because I think you start to, because there absolutely are, right. There's different states with different laws, especially if you were to try to move um, AI into leave of absence space. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
variation that could exist in that area that would make it hard to have a generalized AI model. You would have to be very specific and methodical around that approach, even to the point of where you start to really leverage PII data. And then what are the risks with leveraging PII data?
Yeah.
Because yeah, that's a very challenging experience as a whole. And I mean, we saw it going through the pandemic with just processes in general, not even talking about AI and all the variations that were hitting through the states. It became a very difficult process to manage.
Yeah, I'm really worried about that from a compliance perspective. I'm excited to kind of ask these questions this year on the road with vendors. I think Julie, you ought to probably maybe poke on this too. Is like, what happens if some state or country starts saying that you have to opt in or out of AI? I mean, I think that could happen, and I hope it doesn't because I think you'll suppress innovation. But not to get us on a tangent, but I think localizing AI is a really interesting area that we're going to have to figure out. Because to Julie's point, anything being built now, it's just infused, right? It's kind of on all the time, like Netflix or Spotify uses AI, right, or algorithms. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be interesting to see where this goes.
I think there's another related dimension too that we
Yeah,
haven't talked about. Like Kenny mentioned, the front facing and knowing the audience and just the wide gamut um, of ages or backgrounds that you might be interacting with. And we've just talked about, now the localization, but what about engagement and experience and figuring out what the balance is between I want to automate and I want to make things more efficient. And wait a minute, I want a personal touch here because whether it's leaves or something else, benefits related stuff where there's a human element, maybe you could, but should you?
Yeah, that's a very good perspective, because the customer experience is the biggest thing. And thinking about HR's customers, your customers are your employees, and your business thrives on your employees. So you want to make sure that experience is as positive as possible and balance the weight between self-service and AI versus making sure you're taking care of the employees. I think about what I've always driven in terms of my contact center service desks is average handle time, and I've always disregarded that as like a core performance metric, because I want to make sure they're supporting the customer and taking care of the customer, because the customer is our employees. I think that starts to apply to the AI conversation of how much do you want in that front facing of a chatbot to really try to drive self-service before you say, okay, we don't want you to be frustrated with this experience, so we're going to get you to somebody else.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so we talked a lot about some of the audiences and the front facing and the cool HR type stuff. I want to appeal a little bit more to your back office background and your IT background, Kenny, and ask you about data quality. And there's a lot of realizations, I think, happening and aha moments as folks start to think about what would I even do, how would I automate, what do I need to have, that really puts their data and their data quality under a microscope, I think. Have you run into some of those things as you've been, working around this area?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And leading with data is a key function when you're going through automation, because you have to understand what's in front of you, and thumb in the air doesn't really work in this perspective, because if you want to target what you're working on to get the most value, you got to know what's there. And I always go back to the old adage, right? Shit in, shit out. That's really what it happens with data. So when you put that perspective, you have to go and look at what are you even putting in to the data. And I look at, categorization of support cases. You have your categories and subcategories. If those aren't accurate, you may not be able to get a good perspective from AI process mining to point out opportunities for you to improve your delivery. And that's where, we've had to take some steps back to say, okay, we really need to improve our data structure and quality going in to be able to fully leverage any type of AI, because the AI is going to pull off of that data. And I think even if you look at like generative AI and where that's pulling from, that's all pulling from content that was potentially created by another person or another AI. And that starts to create, you know, an element of concern, because who wrote that? What did it come from? Where did it come from? And if you're doing things internally completely proprietary, then that could be a different conversation. But if you're pulling from externally facing information, it might not be what you really need.
Yeah, and it leads us right into something that we've talked about a little bit here and there over recent months, and that is, what about on HR's mind always is the security controls and the risk of exposing PII or company specific information because you're trying to you're trying to enhance your processes with AI. Like, what sort of learnings have you had there? I think you've been in the thick of it a few times.
Yeah, definitely. And the proprietary information is definitely part of it. I think as ChatGPT as an example has really started to gain traction, gain popularity, there was definitely a communication as I talked to employees that were like, "Hey, we could probably use this." Is like, "Yeah, we might be able to use something like this, but take a minute and understand what the tool is from a security standpoint, right? It's very open. You should not be using proprietary information in it, because we don't control that at all." And I think that's has shifted the conversation to, where is this generative AI platform housed? Who has control over the data going into it? And do you do a AI that's cloud based or an on premises solution? And that's the type of controls that I think are starting to really work in businesses, to say, like, do we on prem can be very cumbersome to deal with, but from a security standpoint, it might be the best option to maintain any information you have. Also, in terms of PII data, do you just avoid it completely? Do you not connect it into a realm where you're using anything with PII data, and be more um, pushed into a direction that's just generalized, where
Yeah.
you can't necessarily get as specific, and but then you might not have the realizations you want.
Yeah. And then how behaviorally do you even make sure that your organization is kind of following the protocols that you set up versus just going to any open browser and, hitting ChatGPT themselves or BART or anything that they might want to use, and just doing it in the spirit of, trying to be more efficient or be more insightful. There's a change management element that's just crazy to think about there.
Yeah, it really is. And I also think that, I think we all go through annual cybersecurity training, um, that AI and generative AI that exists in the world probably needs to be a part of that training every year, to make sure everybody understands what they can and can't do, or should and shouldn't do, when it comes to AI as it really unfolds. Because just talking about there's so many AIs now that are out there that can be used for so many things that probably need to have full evaluations on before you use it.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of the Wild West, right? Before we get to civilization in this space, and I'm sure there are some folks that will make some tragic missteps, and others that will find their way, a lot more cautiously. Um, the stakeholders that you're kind of leading us right into some great conversation around who owns this, and what kind of governance happens. And it reminds me of the things that we saw when a few years back, when robotic process automation kind of became a big thing, and every functional area was starting, to try to dip their toe into it, and IT was trying to lead some things, and operations folks would try some things. Are you seeing similar Wild West, governance type things happening as folks dive into the AI waters? Or what have you seen or experienced there that you could share?
So I'm definitely starting to see more even in other conversations I had, more centralized teams around governance and automation in general, regardless of AI, machine learning, RPA. And that's where I think the structure really needs to come into play, is that centralized model a little bit, because the Wild West creates the most risk. If everybody's off trying to do their own thing, we are better together than we are individually. And thinking about different things is, it needs to be a broader approach. I know when I have conversations with AI and our team members that really support AI, um, legal gets involved, IT risk gets involved. Like, we really try to make sure the right people are involved before having those conversations. And it's not an HR only conversation, right? It's always going to be an HR plus conversation, especially because, I can't have a full conversation on IT risk. I can't have a full conversation on legal. So everybody really needs to be involved in the conversation. It can start internally, but as you actually go to development and employment, it becomes a broader conversation. And I think you mentioned this earlier, like change management is huge. And when it comes to AI, because of so many fears that currently exist around AI, that you really want to make sure you're as transparent as you can be, because everybody needs to understand what's happening, even those that are going to be using it. Like, if you get into front facing, um, making sure everybody understands what it is, because that fear of just dropping it in can worry your employees.
Yeah. Are you seeing more fear initially? This is, pretty newly buzzed. More fear or more excitement? If you had to like put it on a scale, which one's winning right now?
I'm not sure either is winning. I think there's definitely a good amount of excitement, but have seen some fear as well, or at least excitement with a little bit of doubt in the background, that I want to see it when it happens. I'm hopeful for the best, but I want to see it when it happens, because of that whole aspect of, well, if you're simplifying my role, what happens to me? And that's where, really having that transparency in place of how you operate with AI, what's the path forward, what does it look like, versus we're just adding AI. Like, that full picture kind of needs to come into play for everyone, so they don't have that fear. You can work through that fear.
Yeah, there's an education element to this, and in addition to the change, right? Totally.
For sure. I think, Kenny, the one thing that you will find folks just chomping at the bit to ask you, anytime you're talking about AI with peers and other practitioners, is what's the list of the low hanging fruit stuff? Like, what could I hope to do, and do maybe quickly or first, and like where do I start and where should I look first? Have you gotten kind of your own low hanging fruits that you could share with folks out there?
Yeah, I might have some that I can point out that definitely should have a look, when you're looking at low hanging fruit. One, I'll start generalized, and I'll give maybe a couple specific examples. But it when I look at automation opportunities, I look at volume first. Like, if we're doing the same things over and over and over and over again, I really want to understand why. Because if we have to do something over and over and over again, then the volume is high enough, the work is repetitive enough, that AI might be, or automation in general, might be a very good approach. So taking that leading with data approach of saying, okay, where is my scope of support? What in that scope has high volume transactions, has um, that is not very variable and can be worked through in a process map pretty quickly? That's where I would probably start to target first and say, let's take a look at that, because that can create capacity for our teams to do something else, and potentially even improve an AI. Like, if I could free up my frontline employees to improve tier zero self service content that might be a good opportunity because then I'm improving, let's say, a chat bot or that content to then create even more capacity for my team to do something else. And I'll take it to, here's at least one specific example. When I look at leave of absence and the complexity that exists in leave of absence, where I have seen some fairly common standardization could be in return to work processing. Like, I think a lot of companies that I've talked to have had very structured ways that they do their return to work processing, and they're looking for very key items in those letters. And if they're all the same, then why couldn't AI read the letter, confirm that it's a certain structure? Yes, it is, and then process. Why does a person need to do that? Now, if it's, let's say, return with restrictions, the AI could pass it to somebody else to understand what those restrictions are, but it could eliminate a large portion of that work and really focus on what we need to focus on, which is those restrictions in that aspect. And that's just one example, really, of a potential opportunity of volume transactions that have some structure that AI could potentially clear through.
I love that you poked at leave of absence, because we just talked with Keith Christensen on all over the messy business of leave. Sorry, Pete, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, that's a great point, Julie. The leave orchestration pain that we've talked about, I think there's a great opportunity for AI here to connect the dots on all the pieces and parts that have to happen when you take a leave. But can you, just as maybe a side shoot here, do you have like a governance team over kind of governing AI? I mean, how do you set up internally to sort of decide these things and figure out what to chase next and how we roll it out and how we, is there something like that established? Do you need that?
I definitely think you need that.
Yeah.
I think you'd absolutely need a governance team that can monitor where,
Yeah.
what's the value add, what's the process design, because I think it goes back to some of that conversation where there's resistance to using AI is simply because they don't know how it would work.
Yeah.
Like, I can't build that process behind it. So a governance team that really understands it and can drive the education, but also demonstrate this is how we could do it with AI, helps to bridge that gap between teams that would want to use automation, but they're just not sure how to get it started.
Yeah, and someone's, I guess, has to decide, where the money gets, the resources get put towards these things, right? You can't chase everything. So, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I know we could talk about this probably forever, Kenny. Is there anything we should have asked you that we didn't? Other than, we will ask you how people can get a hold of you, where to reach you, or what's next
Yeah.
for you. But did we miss anything really key as you've been through the AI ringers here?
No, I think the only thing that I would say that I think we kind of talked about is when you think about automation, try not to frame it up in your mind about how it would work. Just leave it open. And if you look at a process and you're like, I wonder if we could do that with AI, have that conversation. Because my belief has been, and what I have seen, right, we are a sum of our experiences, and people that are doing this more routinely could have a very different approach to how to do something than somebody who isn't doing it. And that's where I've tried to kind of take um, team members back and say, take a step back and just, is there a reason why we can't do it? Not how does it work, but is there something specific that would cause us to not be able to do this? Because if there isn't, let's have a conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Congrats, Kenny. This is awesome, man. I'm excited. I'd love you to come back maybe in the future and tell us how it's all going. Be awesome. Yeah. No, this is great stuff. I mean, I think this is what you have to do, right? You have to start exploring and figuring out how to engage these things and elevate what augment and elevate, right? Really enhance what you're doing. So as a team. So congrats. Really good stuff.
Yeah, I know, Pete, you'll collect some information. You're pretty good at sharing information on the guests and where to find them or where to reach out to them. So we'll make sure we get that from you, Kenny.
Yeah. Kenny, I assume we
Sure.
can get you on LinkedIn, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. You got anything coming up you want to promote it here or mostly just keeping the lights on in the operations?
Keeping the lights on in
Yeah.
the operation.
You got an important task. Don't let that slip for sure, man. So, well, thank you for coming on. And look for the payroll profession confidence survey. It's out there floating around.
That's right. I think that's a wrap, right? Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, great episode. Good talking to you guys. Good to meet you, Kenny.
Good to meet you. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
Take care, guys.